I'm Jeffrey, 67 years old, and I built my construction company from nothing but hard work and determination. My daughter Amanda has always been the pride of my life, especially after I lost my wife and raised her alone. When Amanda married into the wealthy Hamilton family, things changed. Last Father's Day still haunts me. She gave her father-in-law Howard a $10,000 watch while I got $15 socks. The look on Howard's face told me everything I needed to know. Where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by someone you sacrificed everything for. My life began in Oak Ridge, a small town in the Midwest, where everybody knew each other. My father worked at the local factory, and my mother was a part-time seamstress. We never had much, but they taught me the value of honest work. After high school, while most of my friends went to college, I started working construction. I learned every aspect of the trade from the ground up, getting my hands dirty, and developing calluses that I still have today. By 25, I had saved enough to start my own small construction company. In those early days, I was the boss accountant worker, and sometimes even the janitor. The business grew slowly but steadily as my reputation for honesty and quality work spread through the county. When I was 30, I met Margaret at a friend's barbecue. She was beautiful, smart, and had the most wonderful laugh I had ever heard. Despite coming from a more educated family, Margaret saw something in me that went beyond my rough exterior. We married 6 months later, and those were the happiest days of my life. Margaret taught English at the local high school and supported me through the ups and downs of growing my business. We complemented each other perfectly. She brought culture and refinement into my life while I provided stability and unconditional love. When Amanda was born, our joy was complete. From the moment I first held her, I knew I would do anything to give her a good life. Margaret and I agreed that we wanted to provide Amanda with opportunities neither of us had growing up. We started a college fund when she was still in diapers, putting away what we could each month. Amanda was always a bright child, curious and full of energy. She had Margaret's intelligence, and as she grew older, my determination. As a toddler, she would follow me around the house wanting to help with whatever project I was working on. I made her a tiny tool belt, which she wore proudly as she handed me nails and screwdrivers. Our family life wasn't extravagant, but it was rich in other ways. We took camping trips rather than fancy vacations. Margaret read to Amanda every night, filling her mind with stories and possibilities. I taught her how to fish, change a tire, and even some basics of construction. We were building not just a life, but memories. Everything changed when Amanda turned 15. Margaret started experiencing persistent headaches and fatigue. After weeks of tests, the diagnosis came back: aggressive brain cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. She fought bravely for 18, but cancer doesn't care about courage or love. The day we lost Margaret was the darkest of my life. Amanda and I clung to each other at the funeral, both of us barely able to stand. I remember thinking that I now had to be both mother and father to my teenage daughter, while dealing with my own overwhelming grief. Those first months without Margaret were a blur of pain and adjustment. Amanda withdrew into herself. Her grades slipped, and she started skipping school. I was working longer hours to cover the medical bills that insurance didn't pay, which meant I wasn't home as much as she needed me to be. One night, I came home late to find Amanda crying over one of Margaret's old sweaters. I sat beside her, and for the first time, we really talked about our loss. We made a promise to each other. That night, we would keep Margaret's memory alive by living the way she would have wanted us to. Amanda would pursue her education with renewed purpose, and I would do whatever it took to support her dreams. I took on a second job on weekends to ensure Amanda's college fund remained intact despite the medical bills. Sometimes I worked 70-hour weeks, coming home so tired I could barely eat before falling asleep. But when I saw Amanda's grades improving and her spirit returning, I knew it was worth every exhausted moment. Throughout her high school years, Amanda and I developed a special bond, forged in shared grief and recovery. Every Sunday was our day together. We would make pancakes, Margaret's specialty, and talk about everything and nothing. Amanda would share her hopes for college and beyond, and I would offer what wisdom I could. When Amanda was accepted to Westlake University with a partial scholarship, I couldn't have been prouder. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but between her scholarship, the college fund, and my savings, we made it work. I drove her to campus that first day, helping carry boxes to her dorm room, fighting back tears as I prepared to leave her on her own for the first time. On the drive home, I cried like I hadn't since Margaret's funeral, both from pride and a sense of loss. My little girl was becoming her own person, stepping into a world I had never experienced. College was something neither Margaret nor I had the opportunity to attend, and now our daughter was living that dream for all of us. During her first 3 years of college, Amanda came home for holidays and some weekends. We maintained our Sunday tradition whenever possible. She excelled in her business program, making the dean's list consistently. Each accomplishment felt like a victory for our little family, a fulfillment of the promises we had made to Margaret. Then, in her final year of college, Amanda met Thomas Hamilton during a business internship. The first time she mentioned him, I could hear something different in her voice. When she brought him home during spring break, I understood why. Thomas was tall, handsome, articulate, and clearly came from money. His casual clothes probably cost more than my best suit, and he drove a car worth more than my first house. Despite these differences, I liked Thomas initially. He was polite, asked me questions about my business, and seemed genuinely interested in Amanda's background. I appreciated how he looked at her with admiration, and I told myself that the class differences didn't matter if he made my daughter happy. Amanda graduated with honors, and I sat in the audience bursting with pride, wishing Margaret could have been there to see our daughter in her cap and gown. Amanda secured a good position at a marketing firm in the city, and for the next year, she called regularly and visited when she could. I was adjusting to my empty nest, focusing on my business, which had grown considerably over the years. What I didn't realize then was that meeting Thomas would fundamentally change my relationship with my daughter in ways I never could have anticipated. The seeds of distance were being planted, though they wouldn't fully bloom until that fateful Father's Day, several years later. As Amanda's relationship with Thomas deepened, I saw less and less of my daughter. What had been weekly calls became monthly. Her visits home dwindled from every few weeks to major holidays only. Each time I saw her, she seemed a little different, more polished, wearing clothes I couldn't have afforded to give her. After dating for just over a year, Thomas proposed with a diamond ring that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Amanda called me bubbling with excitement, and I was genuinely happy for her. When she asked if I would come to the city to meet Thomas's parents, I immediately agreed, despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Howard and Vivian Hamilton lived in an exclusive neighborhood, in a house that looked more like a small hotel than a family home. I parked my reliable but aging truck between their luxury vehicles, suddenly conscious of every scratch and dent. I had worn my best suit, the one I reserved for important client meetings, but as soon as I entered their marble-floored foyer, I knew I might as well have shown up in my work clothes. Howard Hamilton had the confident bearing of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. He shook my hand firmly, but briefly, his eyes already moving past me as if looking for someone more important. Vivian was perfectly coiffed, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, as she air-kissed my cheek. "So you're in construction," Howard said during dinner, making it sound like I dug ditches for a living. "Fascinating. We've used Benson and Associates for all our projects. Do you know them?" I didn't, but I recognized the name as one of the largest luxury developers in the country. "Different scale of work," I replied, trying to maintain my dignity. "My company specializes in mid-sized commercial projects and custom homes." "Ah, boutique work," Vivian commented with a thin smile. How quaint. Throughout the evening, they asked surprisingly few questions about Amanda's childhood or our family. When I mentioned Margaret, they offered perfunctory condolences before quickly changing the subject. They were much more interested in telling Amanda about the social connections they could provide her. "The country club membership alone will open doors you never imagined," Vivian told Amanda, who nodded eagerly. As the evening wore on, I noticed Amanda adopting their mannerisms, laughing at inside jokes I didn't understand, seeming almost embarrassed when I told a story about her childhood fishing trips. Thomas remained polite but distant, clearly more his parents' son than I had initially realized. The wedding planning began almost immediately with Vivian taking charge. When I offered to contribute financially, Howard waved away my offer. "We've got it covered, Jeff," he said dismissively. "We want to give the kids a proper start." Still, I insisted on paying for the rehearsal dinner at minimum. It strained my savings, but I wanted to maintain some dignity and role in my only daughter's wedding. The $10,000 I contributed was significant to me, but barely registered in the overall budget that Howard controlled. The wedding itself was more extravagant than anything I could have imagined. 300 guests, most of whom were business associates and social connections of the Hamiltons. I knew perhaps 20 people there, mostly family, and a few close friends. Amanda looked beautiful, but somehow unfamiliar in her designer gown, surrounded by bridesmaids I had never met. The moment that stuck with me most was the difference between Howard's toast and mine at the rehearsal dinner. I spoke from the heart about watching Amanda grow up, about how proud her mother would have been, and my hopes for her happiness. There were tears in a few eyes, and Amanda hugged me tightly afterward. Howard's toast the next day was polished, witty, and centered on welcoming Amanda into their legacy and social circle. He barely mentioned Amanda's accomplishments or character, focusing instead on how she and Thomas would carry on the Hamilton tradition of success and philanthropy. The applause was enthusiastic, but felt hollow to me. After the wedding, Amanda and Thomas moved into a luxury condo purchased by Howard as a wedding gift. I visited once and felt completely out of place among their modern furniture and artwork that probably cost more than my annual income. Amanda gave me a polite tour, explaining the provenance of various items in a way that reminded me painfully of Vivian. Over the next 2 years, the transformation continued. Amanda's calls became even less frequent, usually rushed and distracted. When we did speak, she talked more about charity galas and country club events than her work or personal life. She began to reference summer as a verb and casually mentioned trips to places I would never see. The most telling changes were in how she spoke about my life. What had once been respect for my hard work became something closer to pity. "Dad, you really should consider selling the house and getting a nice condo," she said during one call. "All that maintenance just seems unnecessary at your age." The house she was referring to was the home where she had grown up, where every doorframe had pencil marks tracking her height, where Margaret had planted the garden that I still maintained. The suggestion stung more than she knew. Increasingly, Amanda chose events with Thomas's family over time with me. When I invited her to her cousin's wedding, she declined because it conflicted with the Hamiltons' annual yacht party. When I suggested coming to the city for her birthday, she explained that they would be at the Hamiltons' lake house that weekend. Each instance seemed small on its own, but together they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. My daughter was choosing her new family over her roots, and I was being left behind. 3 years into Amanda's marriage, she and Thomas purchased a mansion just a few blocks from his parents in their exclusive neighborhood. When she invited me to see their new home, I drove the 2 hours to the city, bringing a handmade wooden box I had crafted as a housewarming gift. The house was enormous with soaring ceilings, a sweeping staircase, and more rooms than 2 people could possibly use. As Amanda showed me around, pointing out imported tiles and custom fixtures, I couldn't help but think of our modest 4-bedroom home, where she had been perfectly happy growing up. "This is Brazilian cherry," she explained, pointing to the hardwood floors. "Howard helped us find the importer." "It's beautiful," I said. Though what I really wanted to ask was whether she remembered helping me install the oak floors in our living room when she was 16, how proud she had been of learning to use the flooring nailer. When I presented my gift, Amanda opened it with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Dad, it's rustic," she said, setting the box aside quickly. "Thank you." Later that evening, some of their friends stopped by, young couples dressed in casual clothes that nonetheless screamed money. I sat quietly in the corner of their massive living room nursing a beer while they discussed vacation homes and private schools for children they didn't even have yet. One of Thomas's friends, Blake, asked what I did for a living. When I explained my construction business, he perked up. "We're looking to add a pool house. Maybe you could give us a quote." Before I could respond, Amanda interjected with a tight laugh. "Dad's semi-retired now, and his company focuses on commercial work, but I can give you the number of our contractor." I wasn't semi-retired, and while I did mainly commercial projects, I had built plenty of high-end residential additions over the years. The way she dismissed my capabilities hurt more than if she had said nothing at all. As the evening wore on, I noticed Amanda growing increasingly tense whenever I spoke. When I began telling a story about a challenging hotel renovation my company had completed, she quickly changed the subject to their upcoming trip to Europe. The message was clear: my work and my stories didn't fit into this new world she inhabited. My discomfort in Amanda and Thomas's social circle became a recurring theme. At dinner parties, I was often seated far from Amanda, usually next to someone's elderly relative or a business associate's spouse. Conversations would halt awkwardly when I joined them, resuming with changed topics that excluded me. The most painful example came at my 65th birthday. Amanda had initially forgotten it entirely, then hurriedly arranged a dinner at an upscale restaurant when I mentioned it during a rare phone call. She and Thomas arrived 20 minutes late, already discussing some event they had just come from. The dinner itself was pleasant enough, though Thomas spent most of it answering emails on his phone. I had hoped for a quiet evening to reconnect with my daughter, but dessert had barely been served when Amanda checked her watch. "Dad, I hate to cut this short, but we have Howard and Vivian's charity gala tonight. It's for the Children's Hospital Board. Thomas just joined." "But we haven't even finished dessert," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I know, I'm so sorry," she replied, already signaling for the check. "But these networking events are important for Thomas's career. Howard is introducing him to the hospital chairman tonight." They left me sitting alone at the table, my birthday cake half eaten. The waiter gave me a sympathetic look as he boxed up the remainder. I drove home alone, the boxed cake on the passenger seat, where Amanda should have been wondering when my daughter had become someone who would leave her father's birthday dinner for a networking opportunity. Howard's influence over Amanda extended beyond social events. He began advising her on her career, encouraging her to leave her marketing job for a position at a firm with connections to the Hamilton family business. When she called to tell me about the change, I cautiously asked if it was what she really wanted. "Howard thinks it's the smart move," she replied, as if that settled everything. When I suggested she consider whether the role aligned with her original career goals, she sighed. "Dad, with all due respect, business networking is different now than in your day. Howard understands the modern corporate landscape better." The dismissal of my advice, the implication that my experience was obsolete, cut deeply. I had built a successful business from nothing, navigated economic downturns, adapted to changing markets, and employed dozens of people. Yet in my daughter's eyes, my wisdom couldn't compare to Howard's connections. The growing distance between Amanda and me was noticed by others, particularly my neighbor and friend, Frank Lewis. Frank and I had been friends for nearly 20 years, bonding over our shared love of woodworking and football Sundays. "Have you seen Amanda lately?" he asked one evening as we sat on my deck watching the sunset. "Not since my birthday dinner 2 months ago," I admitted. "She's busy with work and Thomas's family events." Frank took a long sip of his beer before responding. "She's changed, Jeff, and not in a way Margaret would have liked." His words gave voice to thoughts I had been trying to suppress. Margaret had valued family above all else. She had been educated and cultured, but never pretentious. She would have been heartbroken to see the growing gulf between Amanda and me, to witness our daughter's embrace of superficial values. My loneliness after Margaret's death had been profound, but having Amanda's love had made it bearable. Now, as I felt her slipping away, the emptiness returned with new intensity. I found myself avoiding places in town that held too many memories, turning down invitations to events where people might ask about her. Yet despite everything, I maintained hope that things would improve. Perhaps once the novelty of her new lifestyle wore off, Amanda would remember the values she had been raised with. Perhaps once she and Thomas had children, she would understand the importance of family roots and reconnect with me. I never imagined that a Father's Day celebration would be the event that finally forced me to confront the painful truth of how far we had drifted apart. Father's Day had always been special between Amanda and me, especially after Margaret passed away. In previous years, even after her marriage, Amanda had made an effort to spend the day with me, usually taking me to a baseball game or for a fishing trip like we used to do when she was younger. This year, however, Amanda insisted that I come to their house instead. "We'll host both you and Howard," she explained over the phone. "Thomas thinks it will be nice to have everyone together." Despite my reservations, I agreed, hoping for some quality time with my daughter. I spent the week before the celebration looking forward to it, even preparing Margaret's famous apple pie from her handwritten recipe. Amanda had loved it growing up, and I thought it might spark memories of our family traditions. On Father's Day morning, I dressed carefully in a new shirt I had bought for the occasion, packed the pie in a special carrier, and drove to their neighborhood. I arrived exactly at the agreed time of 2 o'clock, pie in one hand and a small gift bag for Amanda in the other. It contained a framed photo of her and Margaret that I had recently found while organizing old albums. When the housekeeper answered the door, I could hear voices and laughter from inside. Following the sound to the back patio, I discovered that Howard and Vivian had already been there for some time. They were comfortably settled in the best seats, drinks in hand, while Thomas manned an elaborate grill setup. "Dad," Amanda exclaimed, coming over to give me a quick hug. "You're here. Let me get you a drink." I noticed she didn't introduce me to the other couple sitting with Howard and Vivian, who I later learned were business partners of Howard's. The central seats were already taken, so I sat at the edge of the group feeling like an afterthought at what was supposed to be a celebration partly for me. "I brought your favorite," I said, holding up the pie. "Your mother's recipe." "Oh," Amanda said, looking flustered. "That's sweet, Dad, but we already have dessert catered. Pierre, from Bistro Lucien, prepared his signature chocolate soufflé." She took the pie and handed it to the housekeeper. Maybe we can have this another time. The pie disappeared into the kitchen, and with it, a piece of my heart. I sat quietly as conversation flowed around me, dominated by Howard's booming voice as he held court with stories about his recent business deals and golf tournaments. Dinner was served by catering staff, an elaborate meal that bore no resemblance to the simple barbecues Amanda and I used to enjoy on Father's Day. I barely tasted the perfectly cooked steak and roasted vegetables, feeling increasingly out of place as Howard made toast after toast, each more self-congratulatory than the last. After dinner, Amanda announced it was time for gifts. She disappeared inside and returned with 2 wrapped packages, one significantly larger than the other. My heart lifted slightly, hoping for a meaningful moment with my daughter. "First for Howard," she said, handing him the larger package with an eager smile. "From both Thomas and me." Howard tore into the wrapping paper with gusto, revealing a sleek wooden box. Opening it, he let out an appreciative whistle. A Patek Philippe. My God, it's the Aquanaut model I've been eyeing. He lifted out an elegant watch with a blue dial, turning it to catch the light. "This is $10,000 retail, if it's a cent," he announced to the table. "You kids shouldn't have." "Only the best for you, Dad," Thomas said, clapping Howard on the shoulder. "You taught me about quality timepieces after all." Howard immediately removed his current watch and put on the new one, making a show of admiring it from different angles. "This completes my collection beautifully. Vivian, look at the craftsmanship." My stomach tightened as Amanda turned to me with the smaller package. "And for you, Dad," she said, handing me a package that couldn't have been larger than a paperback book. I unwrapped it slowly, already knowing whatever was inside couldn't possibly compare to Howard's extravagant gift. Inside was a pair of dark blue socks with tiny fishing lures printed on them. "Since you like fishing," Amanda explained quickly, "they're merino wool, very comfortable. The outdoor store said they're great for hiking too." "Thank you," I managed, forcing a smile. "They're very nice." I didn't need to see the price tag to know these socks probably cost about $15. It wasn't the monetary value that hurt so much as the thoughtlessness, the stark contrast between the consideration given to Howard's gift and the afterthought that was mine. "Well, this calls for a toast," Howard declared, raising his glass. "To fathers and the legacy they create." Everyone clinked glasses, and conversation quickly turned to Amanda and Thomas's upcoming vacation. They were joining Howard and Vivian on their yacht for a 2-week Mediterranean cruise visiting ports in Italy, Greece, and Croatia. "You'll love Santorini," Howard told Amanda. "We'll have the captain anchor in this perfect little cove I know, away from all the tourist boats." I sat silently processing the fact that not only had I received $15 socks while Howard got a luxury watch, but my daughter hadn't even mentioned this major trip to me in our recent conversations. I hadn't been invited, hadn't even been informed. The realization that I was now so peripheral to Amanda's life felt like a physical pain in my chest. As the evening progressed, I found it increasingly difficult to maintain my composure. When Howard began explaining to one of his business associates how he was helping Thomas learn the ropes of real success, not just small business management, with a dismissive glance in my direction, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. I stood up perhaps too abruptly as conversations paused and heads turned toward me. "I should be heading out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a long drive, and I'm not feeling too well suddenly." Amanda frowned. "Already? But we haven't even had dessert." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Just a bit of indigestion or something." I forced another smile. "Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." She walked me to the door, her expression concerned but distracted. "Feel better, Dad. I'll call you tomorrow." On the drive home, the full weight of the day's events pressed down on me. The $15 socks, the $10,000 watch, the casual exclusion from their vacation plans, the pie sitting forgotten in their kitchen. Each detail was a small cut, but together they created a wound too deep to ignore. When I arrived home, the house was dark and silent. I sat in my car for several minutes, unable to muster the energy to go inside. When I finally did, I walked straight to our family photo wall, staring at pictures of Amanda growing up, of Margaret holding her as a baby, of the three of us camping by the lake. For the first time in years, I broke down completely, sliding down the wall until I sat on the floor sobbing like a child. I cried for Margaret, for the daughter I had raised, but seemed to have lost, and for the lonely future stretching ahead of me. She wouldn't even recognize who Amanda's becoming, Margaret, I whispered to the empty house, and I don't know how to bring her back. I spent that night tossing and turning, replaying moments from the Father's Day disaster and earlier interactions with Amanda. By morning, my sadness had crystallized into something more resolute. I realized that I had been enabling Amanda's behavior by accepting her crumbs of attention, by pretending that her growing disregard for me wasn't breaking my heart. As I made my coffee, I came to a decision that felt both painful and necessary. If Amanda valued material wealth and social status over our relationship, perhaps it was time she understood that there were consequences to those choices. For years, I'd lived modestly, despite having more financial resources than most people realized. After building my construction company from the ground up, I had sold it to my longtime foreman 5 years ago for several $1 million. The buyer had kept the company name and retained me as a consultant, which is why many people, including Amanda, assumed I was still running a modest operation. The truth was that between the sale of my business, Careful Investments, guided by my financial advisor, and the life insurance policy Margaret had insisted on, I was worth close to $8 million. Not Hamilton money, certainly, but far more than the struggling retiree Amanda seemed to think I was. I had never flaunted my wealth, preferring to live in our family home and maintain the lifestyle that had always been comfortable for me. I drove the same truck I'd had for 10 years, shopped at the same stores, and kept the same friends. The only luxuries I allowed myself were my woodworking tools and occasional fishing trips. Amanda knew I was comfortable financially, but had no idea of the true extent of my assets. She had never asked, and I had never volunteered the information, believing that money shouldn't define our relationship. That morning, I called my attorney, Michael Preston, who had been a friend since college and had handled all my business affairs. "I need to make some changes to my will," I told him. "Can I come in today?" 3 hours later, I sat in Michael's office explaining my decision. Previously, Amanda had been the sole beneficiary of my estate. Now I wanted to significantly restructure my legacy. I want to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged students entering trade schools or pursuing construction management degrees, I explained. "Let's allocate $6 million for that." Michael raised his eyebrows, but made notes without comment. For Amanda, I wanted to leave the family home and its contents plus personal mementos and photo albums at a cash bequest of $100,000. "That's a significant reduction from your previous arrangement," Michael observed. "I know," I said, the decision weighing heavily despite my conviction. "But I've realized that leaving Amanda millions would only reinforce values I don't believe in. The money would be better used helping young people who truly need it." We spent the next hour working through the details. The scholarship would be named after Margaret, focusing on students who demonstrated not just financial need, but the kind of work ethic and integrity she had valued. I wanted it to create opportunities for kids like I had been, who had talent and determination, but lacked resources. After finalizing the will changes, I made another decision. For years, I had talked about volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, using my construction skills, to help build homes for those in need. Margaret and I had planned to do this together in our retirement. Now seemed the perfect time to fulfill that intention. I stopped by their local office on my way home and signed up as a regular volunteer. The coordinator was thrilled to have someone with my experience join the team, and I was scheduled to start the following week. That evening, I pulled out a bucket list Margaret and I had created years ago. At the top was an extended trip through Europe, visiting all the places she had read about, but never seen. We had planned to go for our 30th anniversary, but she didn't live to see it. After some research online, I booked a 3-month journey across England, France, Italy, and Greece, starting in 2 weeks. It would be bittersweet traveling without Margaret, but I felt her encouraging me to finally take this step. Over the next week, Amanda called several times with perfunctory invitations to dinner or questions about minor matters. I politely declined each invitation, citing prior commitments. I wasn't ready to confront her about Father's Day yet, and I needed time to strengthen my resolve before seeing her again. My friend Frank came over to help me prepare for my trip, offering to watch the house while I was gone. "You're doing the right thing, Jeff," he said, as we sat on the deck after finishing the preparations. "Both with the trip and with the will changes. Amanda needs a wake-up call." "I just hope it's not too late," I replied. "I keep wondering where I went wrong, how she could have changed so much." Frank shook his head. "You didn't go wrong. You raised a wonderful girl. But adults make their own choices, and sometimes they get lost along the way. All you can do is stand firm in your own values and hope they find their way back." And his words comforted me, reinforcing that my decision came from love, not revenge. I wasn't punishing Amanda, but refusing to enable behavior that was harming our relationship and dishonoring Margaret's memory. What I didn't expect was how quickly my decision would force a confrontation. 2 days before my scheduled departure, Michael called me, his voice tight with concern. "Jeff, I think I may have inadvertently created a situation. Amanda stopped by my office today about notarizing some documents for her house refinancing. I mentioned seeing you recently and congratulated her on the scholarship fund, assuming she knew about the changes to your will." My stomach dropped. "I take it she didn't." "No," Michael said grimly. "She looked completely shocked. I tried to backpedal, but it was too late. She left in a hurry, and she seemed quite upset. I'm sorry, Jeff. I should have been more discreet." "It's not your fault," I assured him, though anxiety was building in my chest. This conversation was inevitable. I just would have preferred to have it on my own terms. After hanging up, I waited for the storm I knew was coming. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, my phone began ringing repeatedly. Amanda's name flashed on the screen again and again. I let each call go to voicemail, not yet ready for the conversation. The voicemail started politely enough, with Amanda asking me to please call her back about an important matter. As the day progressed and I didn't respond, her messages grew increasingly frantic, and then angry. "Dad, I know you're there. Pick up the phone. We need to talk about what Michael told me. Dad, seriously, this isn't funny. Call me back immediately. I can't believe you would do this without even talking to me first. Call me back." By evening, she had called 17 times. The final message was tearful and desperate. "Dad, please don't do this. We need to talk. Please." But still, I held firm, knowing that I needed to be completely centered before confronting the situation. I would face Amanda tomorrow after a night to prepare myself emotionally for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. The next morning, I was in my workshop, finishing a small wooden box, similar to the one I had given Amanda as a housewarming gift. This one would stay with me during my travels, holding Margaret's wedding ring and a few small mementos. Woodworking had always calmed me. The focus required pushing other thoughts temporarily aside. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by insistent knocking. I knew who it was before I even reached the door. Amanda stood on my porch, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back hastily, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual tailored outfits. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "We need to talk." Then I stepped aside to let her in, maintaining my composure, despite the tension radiating from her. We moved to the living room where she paced while I sat calmly in my recliner. "Is it true?" she finally asked, stopping to face me. "Are you really cutting me out of your will?" "I'm not cutting you out," I replied evenly. "I'm leaving you the house and some money. The rest is going to a scholarship fund in your mother's name." "But why? What did I do?" Her voice rose indignation, replacing her initial shock. "I thought everything was fine between us." The fact that she could ask that question after years of growing distance culminating in the Father's Day humiliation showed just how disconnected she had become from reality. "Everything is not fine, Amanda," I said quietly. "Hasn't been for a long time. Because I moved to the city. Because I married into a wealthy family. Are you punishing me for having a better life than you did?" Her words stung, but I refused to be provoked into anger. "Is it really a better life if it's changed you into someone your mother wouldn't recognize?" That stopped her momentarily. She sank onto the couch, running her hands through her hair in frustration. "This isn't fair, Dad. Thomas and we've been counting on that inheritance. We have plans." And there it was, the truth I had suspected, but hoped wasn't real. My daughter had been counting on my money, making plans for it, while I was still alive, while barely making time for me in her busy social calendar. "What plans exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Amanda hesitated, then seemed to decide honesty was her best strategy. "Thomas's family business isn't doing as well as everyone thinks. Howard made some bad investments over the past few years. They've been keeping up appearances, but they're actually struggling financially. Thomas is under enormous pressure. So my money was going to bail out Howard's mistakes." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice now. "It's not like that," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "We have debts, Dad. The house, the cars, the lifestyle we're expected to maintain in Howard's circle. We overextended ourselves because Thomas needed to show his clients and partners that the business was thriving." I shook my head, the pieces falling into place. So the Father's Day gift disparity wasn't just thoughtlessness. You needed to keep impressing Howard because you're financially dependent on his approval. Amanda flushed. "You don't understand the pressure. Howard controls everything in that family. If Thomas doesn't maintain certain appearances, he could lose his position in the company. We could lose everything. And what about me, Amanda? Where do I fit into this equation?" She looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean? When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to make perfunctory plans or ask for something, but just to connect." When she didn't answer, I continued. "When was the last time you chose spending time with me over an event with the Hamiltons?" "That's not fair," she said weakly. "I'm busy. My life is complicated." "Let me remind you of some things you might have forgotten," I said, leaning forward. "After your mother died, I worked 2 jobs to keep your college fund intact. I attended every school event, helped with every project, made sure you never felt the absence of her love, even while dealing with my own grief." Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but I pressed on. "When you brought Thomas home, I welcomed him despite our differences. When you started pulling away, I kept reaching out. When you began dismissing my accomplishments and advice, I swallowed my pride. And last week, when you gave your father-in-law a $10,000 watch while handing me $15 socks, I sat there and thanked you. The watch was Thomas's idea, she said quickly. Howard collects watches, and Thomas wanted to impress him. And you went along with it knowing how it would make me feel. I didn't think you'd care about something so materialistic, she protested. It was never about the money, Amanda. It was about the thought, the consideration, the respect. You spent more time choosing Howard's gift than you've spent with me in the past 6 months. She fell silent, the first indication that my words might be getting through. Dad, don't do this. She finally said, her voice smaller now. We need that money. And beyond that, it feels like you're cutting me out of your life. You've been cutting me out of yours for years, I replied. I'm just finally acknowledging it. And before she could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at it, then back at me with evident conflict in her expression. Go ahead, I said. Answer it. She hesitated, then took the call, turning slightly away from me. Yes, I'm with him now. A pause. I don't know, Thomas. I'm trying. Another pause, her shoulders tensing. That's not helping right now. I could hear Thomas's voice through the speaker, not his words, but his demanding tone. Amanda's face flushed with what looked like a mixture of embarrassment and annoyance. I have to go, she said into the phone, her voice tight. I'll call you later. She hung up and turned back to me, composing herself. Thomas is just concerned. This affects him too. What exactly did he say, Amanda? I asked quietly. That I'm being selfish, that you need to fix this, that he's counting on you to secure the money. Her silence was answer enough. I've been watching you become someone different for years now, I continued. Someone who values status over substance, appearances over authenticity. Someone who would give an expensive gift to impress a wealthy father-in-law while treating her own father as an afterthought. That's not fair, she repeated, but with less conviction. Tell me honestly, if Margaret were here, what would she think of the choices you've been making, of how you've treated me, of how you've allowed Howard and Vivian to reshape you into their image of what a daughter-in-law should be? At the mention of her mother, Amanda's carefully constructed defenses began to crumble. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know what happened, she whispered. I just wanted to fit in with them at first. Then it became about proving I belonged, that I wasn't just some construction worker's daughter they had to tolerate. Before I knew it, I was caught in this web of expectations and appearances. For the first time in our conversation, I heard genuine remorse in her voice, saw a glimpse of the daughter I had raised. The scholarship is a good thing, Amanda, I said more gently. It will help kids who need it in your mother's name. And you don't need millions to be happy. Your mother and I certainly didn't. But what about us? She asked, wiping her tears. Are you just giving up on me? I'm not giving up on you, I said firmly. I'm refusing to enable behavior that's destroying our relationship and changing you into someone you were never meant to be. The money stays in the scholarship fund, but my door is always open for my daughter. The real Amanda, not the polished socialite who's embarrassed by her blue-collar father. She looked around the living room, her eyes lingering on family photos and mementos from her childhood. For perhaps the first time in years, she seemed to truly see the home where she had grown up, the life we had built together. I need to think, she said, finally rising. This is a lot to process. Take all the time you need, I replied. But know this, I'm leaving for Europe in 2 days, a trip your mother and I always planned to take together. I'll be gone for 3 months. Europe? She looked shocked. You never mentioned this. There's a lot we don't tell each other anymore, Amanda. She nodded slowly, gathering her purse. At the door, she paused, turning back to me with uncertainty in her eyes. I'll call you tomorrow, she said, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. I'd like that, I replied, not knowing if she actually would, or if this confrontation would only widen the gulf between us. As I watched her drive away, I felt both drained and strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth instead of swallowing my hurt. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for myself and for the values Margaret and I had tried to instill in our daughter. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. Now it was up to Amanda to decide what kind of person she truly wanted to be and what kind of relationship she wanted with her father. A week passed without a word from Amanda. I had departed from my European journey as planned, beginning in London, with a visit to Westminster Abbey and the Tower of London. Despite the beauty surrounding me, I couldn't help checking my phone regularly, hoping for a message from my daughter. None came. I threw myself into the experience, taking a river cruise on the Thames, visiting museums Margaret had always wanted to see, and walking through neighborhoods she had read about in her beloved British novels. Each night in my hotel room, I wrote in a journal addressing entries to Margaret, as if writing her letters about the journey we should have taken together. 10 days into my trip, as I sat at a sidewalk cafe in Paris, watching people stroll along the Seine, my phone rang. Amanda's name appeared on the screen, and my heart jumped. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice casual despite my racing pulse. "Dad," Amanda said, her voice tentative. "Where are you?" "I went by the house, and Frank said you'd already left for Europe." "I'm in Paris," I replied. "Just finished visiting Notre Dame this morning." A pause then. "It looks different since the fire, doesn't it? Parts of it are still under reconstruction, but it's still magnificent," I said, surprised she knew about the cathedral's recent history. "Mom used to have that picture book of European cathedrals," Amanda said softly. "I remember her showing me Notre Dame and talking about the flying buttresses and rose windows." The fact that she remembered this detail from our family life, something I hadn't thought about in years, gave me a flicker of hope. "She would have loved seeing it in person," I said. "Dad, I've been doing a lot of thinking." Amanda continued, her voice stronger now. "About everything you said about how I've been acting, about what Mom would think of me now." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I went through some old photo albums at home," she said. "Found pictures of us camping, of the treehouse you built me, of Mom teaching me to make pie crust. I had forgotten so many things about our life together." "Those were good times," I said simply. "The best," she agreed. And somehow I lost sight of that. I got caught up in the Hamiltons' world, trying to prove I belonged there, that I was good enough. I could hear her taking a deep breath before continuing. "I went to see Howard yesterday," she said, causing me to sit up straighter in surprise. I returned the watch. "You did what?" I gave it back to him. Told him I couldn't accept such an expensive gift when I'd given my own father $15 socks. He was not pleased. I could imagine Howard's reaction, his pride wounded by such a public acknowledgement of impropriety. "That must have been difficult," I said carefully. "It was," she admitted. "But it felt right. I also told him and Thomas that I needed some time to reevaluate my priorities. I've taken a leave of absence from work and moved into a hotel temporarily." "Amanda," I began, concerned about the drastic steps she was taking, but she interrupted me. "It's okay, Dad. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe, like I'm thinking clearly again." She paused. "I've been talking to a therapist too, just 2 sessions so far, but it's helping me understand how I got so lost." Pride swelled in my chest at her courage and self-awareness. "I'm glad to hear that, sweetheart. There's something else," she continued. "I signed up for Habitat for Humanity. Frank told me you had started volunteering with them before your trip. I went to my first build yesterday. It felt good to create something real with my hands the way you taught me." Tears pricked my eyes as I imagined Amanda, probably dressed in clothes far too nice for construction work, swinging a hammer and connecting with the values I had tried to instill in her. "Your mother would be proud," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud too." "Dad," she said hesitantly, I know I have a lot to make up for, and I understand why you changed your will. I want you to know I respect your decision. The scholarship in Mom's name is perfect." Her acceptance of my decision without further argument showed a maturity I hadn't seen in her for years. "Thank you for understanding," I said. "But this isn't about punishing you, Amanda. It's about doing what I think is right." "I know that now," she replied, "and I'm trying to do the same." We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on small details of our lives that we had stopped sharing years ago. She asked thoughtful questions about my trip, genuinely interested in my experiences. As our conversation wound down, she surprised me with an unexpected question. "Dad, would it be okay if I joined you in Italy next month, just for a week or so? I'd pay my own way, of course." Joy surged through me at the thought of sharing part of this journey with my daughter. "I'd love that, Amanda. More than I can say." "Great," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'll look at flights and let you know the dates that work." After we hung up, I sat at the cafe for a long time watching the boats on the Seine and feeling lighter than I had in years. One conversation couldn't erase all the pain and distance that had grown between us, but it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild our relationship on a more authentic foundation. True to her word, Amanda flew to meet me in Florence 3 weeks later. She arrived with just one suitcase, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup that had become her uniform in recent years. We spent a wonderful week exploring the city together, visiting galleries and churches, eating at local trattorias rather than fancy restaurants. One evening, sitting at a small table overlooking the Arno River, Amanda broached the subject of her marriage. "Thomas and I are taking some time apart," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. "He doesn't understand the changes I'm trying to make. Says I'm having some kind of crisis or breakdown." "And what do you think?" I asked carefully. She considered the question before answering. "I think I'm finally waking up from a long sleep, remembering who I really am and what actually matters." She looked up at me, her expression serious. "I don't know if our marriage will survive this, Dad. Thomas might not be able to accept the real me, especially if Howard turns against us completely. Whatever happens," I assured her, covering her hand with mine, "you'll be okay. You're stronger than you know." When Amanda returned to the States, she continued her involvement with Habitat for Humanity and started working part-time at a marketing firm that specialized in nonprofit clients, taking a massive pay cut, but finding more meaningful work. She moved out of the mansion she had shared with Thomas and into a modest apartment, beginning the process of simplifying her life. By the time I returned from my European journey 3 months after it began, Amanda and I had re-established our Sunday tradition, talking by phone, when we couldn't be together in person. Sometimes our conversations were light, sharing details of our week. Other times, they were deeper, processing the changes in her life and relationship. On my first Sunday back home, Amanda came over with groceries and cooked dinner for us, something she hadn't done in years. As we sat at the kitchen table, where we had shared so many meals as a family, she presented me with a small, carefully wrapped package. "An early Father's Day gift," she explained, "since I got it so wrong last time." Inside was a handcrafted wooden picture frame, clearly made by Amanda herself, with visible evidence of her inexperienced woodworking skills. It held a photo of the 3 of us, Amanda, Margaret, and me, from a camping trip when Amanda was about 10 years old. Around the frame, she had burned a simple message: "Family is our greatest wealth." "I made it at the community workshop where I've been taking woodworking classes," she said, watching my reaction nervously. "It's not very good, I know. Nothing like what you could make." "It's perfect," I told her, my voice catching. "The most thoughtful gift you could have given me." And as I placed the frame carefully on the mantel, I thought about the journey we had taken, both literally and figuratively, since that painful Father's Day nearly a year ago. The path to healing our relationship hadn't been easy or straightforward, but we had found our way back to what mattered most. Amanda's marriage to Thomas ultimately ended in divorce, a painful but necessary conclusion to a relationship built more on appearances than genuine connection. Howard and Vivian predictably sided with their son, cutting Amanda off from their social circle entirely. But instead of devastation, Amanda found liberation in the break. She continued working with nonprofits, eventually starting her own small marketing consultancy focused on helping charitable organizations maximize their impact. We resumed our fishing trips and weekend projects, rebuilding not just furniture, but our bond as father and daughter. The scholarship fund in Margaret's name awarded its first grants to 5 deserving students a moment. Amanda and I celebrated together at a small ceremony. Watching those young people accept the opportunity to build better lives through education and hard work, I felt Margaret's presence strongly. Her values living on in this legacy. Money can buy expensive watches and mansions, but it can't purchase genuine connection or true happiness. Sometimes the most valuable gifts come in the simplest packages, like $15 socks given with genuine love, or a handmade picture frame that represents a daughter finding her way home. Where are you watching from today? I hope this story resonated with you in some way. If you have experienced family tensions around wealth status or values, know that healing is possible when we focus on what truly matters. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story touched your heart, hit the like and subscribe buttons. Every family journey has its challenges, but authenticity and love can overcome even the deepest divides. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you treasure the genuine connections in your own life above all else.